Okay, so today we're going to be looking at, uh, kind of a major prediction that could really shake things up, especially in the tech world, and if you're involved in software development or even just interested in the whole process of how software gets made. You're going to want to pay attention to this one.
Yeah, we're going deep on some recent statements from two pretty big names actually. Sridhar Vembu, who founded Zoho, and then also Sam Altman, the CEO over at OpenAI.
Right. And the big question that we're going to try to get to the bottom of today is, will AI, will artificial intelligence essentially take over the vast majority of coding jobs?
It's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah. And it is, and it's coming from two people who really are right at the forefront of, software and AI.
Yeah.
Sridhar Vembu, as I mentioned, founded Zoho, which has become, a major company, offers all kinds of software, for businesses. And then, of course, Sam Altman. A lot of people who are familiar with OpenAI. They've been behind some really, really groundbreaking AI models.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that both of them have recently come out and said some pretty similar things about what they think the future holds for the world of software development.
So our goal today is to really understand, you know, what are they basing these predictions on? Like, what's the logic behind it?
Hmm.
What kind of timeline are they thinking about? Even if they're not giving us specific dates. And then ultimately, what could all of this mean for, the future of software engineering?
Yeah, like how is this going to play out in the real world?
Exactly.
So let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's start with Sridhar Vembu.
Yeah, his take on this is really something. One of the first things that kind of jumps out at you is this prediction that AI is going to end up taking over something like 90% of all the programming work.
90%. I mean, that's massive.
Yeah, and he's actually got a reason for why he landed on that number. He thinks it's going to happen because of what he calls boilerplate code.
Boilerplate. Okay, so like, what is that
Okay.
exactly?
Yeah, so basically he's talking about code that's really repetitive, kind of standardized code that's used over and over again. And he estimates that this kind of code makes up something like 90% of what programmers are actually doing right now.
So 90% of a programmer's time is spent on this kind of, repetitive work.
Yeah, that's his estimate, and it really makes you think, what are the specific kinds of code that fall into this boilerplate category? Are we talking about like basic database operations or those standard user interface elements that you see everywhere, or is it something completely different? Understanding what exactly we're talking about here could help us get a better sense of what jobs or what tasks are actually at risk of being automated.
That's a really good point. And,
Yeah.
to kind of dig a little deeper into that 90% figure, Vembu, he actually brings up some classic software development thinking.
Hmm.
He talks about this idea from the Mythical Man month, the difference between essential complexity and then accidental complexity.
Oh, yeah, that's a really helpful way to look at it.
Did you break that down for us?
Sure. So you've got your essential complexity, which is basically like the inherent difficulty of the problem you're actually trying to solve with the software, the core logic, the unique challenges of that specific task. And then you have accidental complexity, which is all that kind of extra complexity that comes from the tools we use, the programming languages, the development process, all the stuff that's not actually directly contributing to solving the main problem.
So like extra stuff, basically.
Yeah, and Vembu's argument is that AI is going to get really, really good at dealing with this accidental complexity, that 90% of boilerplate stuff, and that will free up human programmers to focus on the essential complexity, the real problem solving.
So basically AI takes care of the routine and humans can focus on the big picture thinking.
Yeah,
Now
exactly.
that's a really interesting idea. And, as someone who doesn't code,
Yeah.
I can see how that could be really powerful.
Yeah.
But Vembu also asks this really intriguing question. He says, can it find totally new patterns?
Right. And that question really gets to the heart of like, human creativity versus artificial intelligence.
Right.
AI is amazing at learning from massive amounts of data and replicating patterns, but Vembu's pointing to this unique human ability to come up with completely new ideas, solutions that haven't been seen before. That kind of true innovation.
Yeah. And so even if AI is doing most of the coding in the future, that human expertise, that ability to think outside the box, that's going to be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about following instructions, it's about coming up with the instructions in the first place.
Now, are there any signs, early signs that AI is moving beyond just replicating, existing patterns? Like, are we seeing any hints of actual, creative problem solving in code from AI?
Hmm. That's a great question, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on, as AI continues to evolve. But one thing that really shows how seriously Vembu is taking this whole technological shift is the fact that he recently stepped down as CEO of Zoho. Yeah, he decided to dedicate more of his time to research and development, and a lot of that focuses on AI.
Huh. So he's really putting his money where his mouth is.
It really shows that he believes in the power of AI, not just for his own company, but for the entire tech world.
So he's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk.
Exactly. And, speaking of walking the walk, let's shift gears and talk about Sam Altman's perspective on this.
Yeah, what does the OpenAI CEO have to say?
Well, his wording might be a little different, but the main message seems to line up with Vembu's.
Okay, so what's Altman saying?
Well, he also predicts that as AI models continue to develop, we're going to see a reduced need for software engineers.
Oh, wow, so that's pretty direct.
Yeah, he's not sugarcoating it, but he does offer a more immediate kind of near-term outlook too. He suggests that in the short term, AI is going to act more like a really powerful tool that will allow each software engineer to accomplish much, much more for a while.
So in the beginning, it's more about like boosting human capabilities, not necessarily replacing jobs right away.
Right, but you have to wonder if AI is already writing, a significant chunk of the code. Is that really just augmentation, or is it already changing what it means to be a developer?
That's a really good point. And it
Yeah.
makes you think about how fast this is all happening. And Altman estimates that at least half of the code in many companies is already being written by AI.
Yeah, and he even says it could be past 50% now.
Wow, that's higher than I would have guessed.
It's a pretty big number, and it really highlights how quickly AI-powered coding tools are advancing. This is happening faster than a lot of people might realize, and it raises some questions, like, are there certain areas of software development where AI is already doing most of the work?
Yeah.
What does this tell us about how sophisticated these tools are becoming?
Yeah, and then he also talks about what he sees as the next big step. He calls it agentic coding.
Right? Agentic coding.
So what does that even mean?
Well, it sounds like he's talking about moving towards a future where AI has even more independence in the coding process. Like, imagine AI agents that can handle complex tasks, maybe even entire projects, without needing as much direct input from humans.
So instead of just suggesting the next line of code, the AI is actually understanding the bigger picture and figuring out how to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's say you need to build a system for user authentication. An AI agent could potentially understand that high-level requirement and then go ahead and generate all the necessary code modules, make design decisions, maybe even test its own work, all with very little human oversight.
Wow, so it's like AI is becoming the project manager.
In a way, yeah. And Altman's agreement with Vembu's long-term prediction, that we'll need fewer human coders, it really just underlines how significant this transformation could be.
So if we kind of step back and look at both of these perspectives, where do Vembu and Altman agree, and where do they maybe put a slightly different emphasis?
Well, the big thing they agree on is that AI is going to completely change the game for software engineering. They both see this as a trend that's not going away, and they both believe that a large part of the coding process is going to be automated. But Vembu really zeroes in on eliminating that accidental complexity, all that repetitive boilerplate code, while he acknowledges that, he also emphasizes how much code is already being generated by AI today and the potential for agentic coding to further reduce the need for human coders in the future.
So it's like they're both looking at the same big picture, but they're focusing on different parts of it.
Right. And I think it's really interesting to consider what all of this means for our listeners. Whether you're a coder yourself or you're running a business that depends on software, this is going to have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're in software development, you have to be thinking about what skills are going to be most important in the future. If AI is taking over a lot of the routine coding, what are the new areas of expertise that are going to be in high demand?
Yeah. Are we going to see a greater need for people who can design complex systems at a high level? People who are really good at defining the problems that need to be solved with software. And maybe there's going to be more specialization in areas that require that uniquely human creativity and critical thinking. Like finding those totally new patterns that Vembu was talking about.
Right. So maybe it's less about writing lines of code and more about understanding the bigger picture
Yeah.
and coming up with those creative solutions.
Yeah. And developers might also need to get really good at things like prompt engineering for AI coders, understanding the limitations of AI generated code and really focusing on the overall architecture and integration of complex systems. It's almost like we're on the verge of a whole new era for software development. What it means to be a software engineer is changing.
And what about the businesses that rely on software?
Mm.
What are some of the things they need to be thinking about?
Well, there's definitely the potential for huge gains in efficiency and maybe even lower costs for software development.
Right, that sounds good.
Yeah, but businesses are also going to need to figure out how to integrate these AI tools effectively.
Yeah.
How to manage teams where AI is a major contributor, how to make the most of the changing skills of their human engineers.
So it's not just about buying the AI tools. It's about figuring out how to use them strategically.
Exactly. And then there are also new challenges that come up, things like making sure the AI generated code is high quality and secure. And of course, there are ethical considerations too. When we start relying more heavily on AI for something as important as software development, we need to be thinking about those things.
For the average person and the everyday consumer, this could mean that new software gets developed faster.
Yeah.
And maybe the apps and services they use every day become more affordable.
Yeah, exactly. So there are potential benefits for everyone.
Yet the big takeaway for me here is that AI could really free up human developers to focus on the really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
The challenging parts of software development, the innovation, the creation of new solutions.
Yeah, it's about augmenting human capabilities, at least in the short term, and then maybe eventually reshaping the entire landscape of who's involved in coding and what that work even looks like.
So it's not just the future of coding, it's the future of software itself.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into the predictions of two really influential figures in the tech world.
Yeah, it's given us a lot to think about.
So just to recap, both Sridhar Vembu and Sam Altman, they're both saying that they expect AI to become a dominant force in software development. And that could lead to some big changes in the need for human coders as we know it today.
Right, and the key takeaways are that AI is already playing a major role in generating code, and things like agentic coding suggest that we're going to see even more AI autonomy in this field in the future. And Vembu's distinction between essential and accidental complexity, that's really helpful for understanding where AI is likely to have the biggest impact in the near term.
So here's a thought-provoking question for you to consider after our deep dives today. As AI takes on more of those traditional coding tasks, what completely new roles and opportunities might open up for people who have a deep understanding of both software development principles and the rapidly evolving capabilities of AI? Think beyond just writing code. What about the future of designing, architecting, and innovating with software in this constantly changing world?
Yeah, it's not just about the code, it's about the whole process of creating software.
Exactly. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the future of software development.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride.
Definitely.
See you next time.
See ya.